Good evening, everyone, and welcome. Tonight, the Montclair NAACP kicks off our Black History Month programming with a keynote address. Our theme this year for Black History Month is Black to the Future. And tonight, we will focus on Black literacy, today's civil rights issue that impacts our entire future. Before we get started, we're going to open with prayer, and we're going to have Miss Myrna Poole lead us in a prayer. Thank you, Myrna.
Okay. Father God, thank you so much for just allowing us to gather tonight. Thank you for just this opportunity to learn more and more about dyslexia and literacy and the importance of it. I thank you for the speakers. I pray that you be with them, that they will give us exactly what we need so we can do better and be a change agent with this very important topic. I thank you for the organizers. I pray for just this time. Help us to focus and learn. We pray all this in your son, Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Thank you, Myrna. Okay, so tonight is really an important evening. Myrna has already opened it up with this beautiful prayer, and we want to get a kid's perspective of things. And this is not like any other little kid. She's about to drop a little some jewels. So it's about the youth. And so right now I want to invite Miss Ife Joseph to come up, and she's going to say a few words this evening. So let me see if I can pin you, and the floor is yours, Ife.
Thank you. Okay, before I start, I would just like to thank Miss Lene for hosting this and the Montclair NAACP. Okay. Today, I'll be sharing a presentation about the Black child's relationship with reading. The brilliant Black race, the inventors of mathematics, medicine, writing, and if being honest with ourselves, the building blocks of our current society. So why is it that most of us struggle with reading? Today, I'm going to be talking about Black children's reading scores, why scores are like this, solutions, and the importance of such. So let's look at the problem, specifically the concerningly low scores of Black students. In the Fairfax, Virginia School District, the performance gap in reading pass rates between Black and white students was nearly 20 percentage points. This did not change from 1984 when the district made minority achievement a priority to 2021 when the NAACP got involved. Another example of this is seen in the graphs show testing scores from a suburban 3rd to 5th grade school in New Jersey. The graph on the left shows test scores by ethnicity. As you can see, Black students, shown in orange, consistently have the lowest scores throughout the grades. To right is test scores by economic position. The blue represents children who have free reduced lunch, essentially students in lower economic households. In America, this economic class is greatly made up of Black people. So why is it that Black children have such low scores with drastic contrasting from their white peers? The general issue in learning how to read is phonics-based reading instruction. There is an absence of systematic cumulative phonics-based reading instructions in the early elementary classroom. Some teachers have always incorporated phonics, intentionally sequenced lessons, and how to sound out words from letters, but the district had not made a requirement, meaning students who don't get these certain teachers wouldn't have learned enough phonics to be able to read certain words. So they are expected to rely on the picture in the book and the first letter to recognize or guess the words, which, as we must know, is not reading. Reading is the process of looking at a series of written symbols and getting meaning from them. So this method of quote-unquote learning how to read wouldn't be of any help at all as they grow up and the texts they are assigned to read have no pictures and the words become more complex. Outside assistance is of no real aid as it's not affordable. A white family can spend more than $20,000 on private language therapy to help their dyslexic child learn to read, And going back to the fact children of lower economic households had low scores, this would disproportionately impact children of minorities, as getting out of school help would be inaccessible to the largest group of those who need it. You see, in the NAACP and other organizations, improving reading instructions and skills of Black children is a civil rights issue, and a basic right that should be seen as essential as water. Therefore, we need to find, use, and prioritize different solutions to this problem. Here are some that the Fairfax district mentioned from earlier and other districts have started using. School administrators need to train in LETRS, or Language Essentials for Teachers of Reading and Spelling, which will teach them the science of reading, which will include how students learn to decode letters on the page and form meaning from words. Districts need to give all kindergarten through second grade teachers scripted lesson plans featuring phonics and implement them immediately. There needs to be a universal access to stronger reading instructions, as it might be the most effective way to narrow the yawning racial achievement gap in reading results. Now, why exactly is all of this so important, one might ask? Well, pupils who are labeled emotionally disturbed are the main victims of the classroom to prison pipeline. But the youth who are labeled emotionally disturbed are almost all Black and experiencing a struggle with reading. It's seen that as soon as they learn to read, a lot of their troubling behavior disappears. So it's not just teaching children how to read, but keeping them out of cells, a place much too many Black people find themselves in much too often. Our ancestors fought for their freedom through learning how to read and write, a right that was taken away from them as our literacy was a threat to our system. We cannot allow this to be taken away from us. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Ife. Thank you. Beautiful. She did that research and made this presentation. I was like, wow, good for you doing the research. Right now, we're going to move into someone from our state NAACP. I would like to say a new friend, and I'm looking forward to doing more work with him. Christopher Wilson is a member of the NAACP Plainfield branch and the NAACP New Jersey State Conference Education Committee. As a former New Jersey public school elementary teacher and now an education consultant, he has spent the last 15 plus years focused on empowering teachers and learners. His first grade teacher, Miss Marie Pregler, taught him how to read. Chris, you have the floor.
Thank you. So first I want to appreciate Miss Joseph for that amazing presentation. That was so well put together, and I was really impressed with that, and I want to thank her for her efforts. I guess, where to start on this journey of reading. For me, so much of Miss Joseph's presentation really was personal and rang true, because in my personal experience, I was a free lunch kid. My parents were not college educated. You would consider us to be, poor or in that category. And so access to education, to reading, were so important to my family. And on paper, there were a lot of things that, at least on paper, could be perceived to be in the way of me achieving things, right? Again, free reduced lunch kid, considered to be living, in poverty. Parents didn't go to college. But my first grade teacher, Mrs. Pregler, did tell me that I was going to go to college. I didn't know what that was when she told me that. But she took me under her wing, and I remember sitting at the table with Mrs. Pregler, looking at, the books and the words and the letters and the sounds and spelling, and just really wanting to do well for Mrs. Pregler, and she's still teaching. by the way. She's now in her late 80s teaching adult learners who are learning the English language. But I say all of that to say that, you know, again, although on paper there were some obstacles that I had, I also know that the inequities are amplified for Black children and who experience either unaddressed dyslexia or related learning disabilities. And so, you know, as I went through my own experience of being a teacher, there were things that I learned about the teaching of reading, and there were things perhaps that were gaps in my knowledge as a teacher. And I taught in New Jersey and Pennsylvania for you know, over 10 years. But really where this started for me and why I reached out to NAACP is with my son, Jacob, who really struggled to learn to read in first grade. Now, I'm a former elementary school teacher, and I thought that I knew some things about how to help my son learn how to read. But when he began to struggle, I realized very quickly that I didn't know how to help him. And one of the things that really stuck out to me and scared me was how that affected him emotionally. Crying when it came to reading at night, not wanting to read, not wanting to participate in activities. And what also scared me was how the school started to think about him in report cards and in comments, that he wasn't behaving, that he wasn't paying attention. And so I could start to see, you know, a certain kind of picture of my son developing that I didn't think was totally fair, and I knew was really because he was struggling. And I live in a, you know, what you might call a high performing or an affluent community in New Jersey. And there's lots of things going for us, right? Both of my child's mom and dad are educated, you know, with a college degree. You know, we have means that I didn't have growing up. I'm a former school teacher, and in spite of all of that, my child struggled to read. And then when I struggled with getting him support, I started connecting with other families, you know, other folks in my community. And everything that Miss Joseph shared was totally true in the case for my community, where the quote unquote best schools are supposed to be. And it's true for free kids who have free or reduced lunch. The same demographic truths are in our data. This year from the Start Strong assessment, you see that same data. And so this really bothered me because, again, as a teacher, I couldn't do anything about it. I didn't have the knowledge to help my own son. And I knew how deeply it was affecting him. And I didn't want any other parent or child to feel what my son was feeling and what, you know, we were going through. Because the last thing that Miss Joseph said about being able to support through, it was something to the effect of being able to support through outside tutoring, is how I read it. And forgive me, Miss Joseph, if I'm misquoting you. But when I was a child, I see myself in the graph. There would have been no opportunity for a tutor, none. My parents could not have afforded that. I was very fortunate for my son that I could, and that was how we got him the support that he needed to now be and see himself as a reader, though continuing to struggle with dyslexia. So when I took all of this together, I said, you know, reaching out to other folks in my community, we have to work with other folks in the state, in the community, in the country, to share our stories that we're not necessarily talking about together. I didn't know that my neighbor's son was struggling with reading until I asked him, quite frankly. But we have these shared stories, and we know some common solutions. And we know that this is an important issue. It's the issue. Because in first grade, if a child can't read and is starting to get down on himself and crying and starting to be labeled as a behavior problem and somebody who's not paying attention in school, as my son was, then those issues compound, and that your sense of self is just totally destroyed when you look around and you see other kids are doing well and I'm struggling, and it's my fault. So, looking at the data in our community and understanding how important diversity, equity, and inclusion are in our state, and initiatives are being implemented at our Board of Education. I started there, and then I ultimately reached out to NAACP and Tom Puryear, who's the education chair for the state. And I said, I see this as an issue in my community. And when I look at the data for the state, I see the data look like this in a lot of places. And I wonder if there are common solutions that we can work on articulating. And it turned out that in 2014, NAACP National had a resolution articulating its support for effective evidence-based reading instruction and understanding what's necessary to support students with dyslexia who struggle with reading. And so we developed at the state level a resolution putting a fine point on, for our state, what that means in practice in terms of the laws that already exist, what the intent behind some of those laws were, like our universal screening law, and what it means to have evidence-based intervention for students who are identified as having dyslexia. And so that's, what the state conference was able to do, was create, that resolution and then have that passed at the state level to, articulate that, from NAACP's perspective, it is a civil right. Literacy and the right to read are civil rights. We do support and, encourage our partners in education and throughout the state to, take a close look at practices and the intent behind the legislation and fulfill the promise of effective reading instruction for all students.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you so much for sharing. So we're going to keep this evening moving forward, and we all came here to learn how to move forward together as a community. I'm so excited. I'm trying to contain myself here. I'm so excited to introduce Kareem Weaver. He is the co-founder and executive director of FULCRUM, which partners with stakeholders to improve reading results for students. He is the Oakland NAACP's second vice president and chair of its education committee. His advocacy is featured in the upcoming film, The Right to Read. Mr. Weaver previously served as New Leaders Executive Director of the Western Region and was an award-winning teacher and administrator. He has undergraduate degrees from Morehouse College and a master's in clinical community psychology from the University of South Carolina. Mr. Weaver believes in the potential of all students, the brotherhood of man, and the importance of service above self. His educational heroine for literacy instruction is the late Marva Collins. Welcome, Kareem Weaver. I'm so excited. Thank you so much, and I cannot wait to hear what you have to share with us. Can we all kind of wave and yay?
I'm waving back at you. Thanks, Lene. I
Okay.
appreciate that.
All
I
right.
appreciate it. Hello, Montclair and New Jersey. All right. It is so good to be here with you all. I can't tell you, listening to Ife, it was, man, that brought tears. You just don't know. I needed to hear that. I needed to hear that. To hear young people speak with such clarity and power, and we put them in position to be to explain to us adults what they need is phenomenal. So I'm grateful to her. Thank you all for being here. Yeah, I wish I could give you a hand, a young lady, but I appreciate you virtually. Okay. And so I want to jump right in. They told me got about 30 minutes or so to get in on this, and maybe a few more. Maybe we'll see how it goes. But and then there's going to be some Q&A afterwards. But let's get right into it. I'm so glad that we're here, and I'm also happy that my team from FULCRUM is here, which is a nonprofit that I started to really just push on this as best that I can. So let me share my screen, and away we go. We don't have time to waste. I'm ready to rock and roll. All right, let's see. All right, now you talking big. Make sure you can say it. Can I get the sound up? Looks like I may not be able to get the sound going. Don't know why, but don't know why. But that's all right. We're gonna keep it moving because the deck itself is good, and I'm always ready for emergencies. So this is really quickly. You know, I'm gonna take the mask off a little bit tonight, and we're just gonna try to make it as plain as we can, because I think we have to. I think it's that season. This fight for better equity in literacy, no, for excellence in literacy, not equity. I don't want to be equitable with other people who are also struggling. We want excellence for all kids, and it is in many ways an unseen crisis. And the subtext of this, I'll explain this later, is, you know what? If you guys would just be quiet, stay in your place, black, white, other, just go on with all that. We have other fish to fry right now, other things that have our attention. Oh, well, as Lene said, I'm the second VP of Education Committee. I'm speaking tonight on behalf of FULCRUM and myself, but I'm proud to serve under the leadership of Cynthia Adams, the Oakland branch of the NAACP, and also education chair. And I was on the state committee, the ed team, for a while. Loved that work as well. All right, let's go. There's going to be some resources that I share tonight, some videos. Now, I'm telling you, I didn't plan for this not to work, but I always have a fail safe. So all the things that you would have seen, those are the links to the things. So you can get it on your own. That's just how I roll. So tinyurl.com, KW, my initials, and Montclair, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You can look at all the videos you would have seen and heard. You can go there. So yeah, I guess it all works out. So you can write down just one of those, and then of course the number changes with a different resource that you need. Okay. We good? You all right? tinyurl.com/KW and Montclair 1 through 6. And the capitals don't matter. Tiny URLs don't care. All right, let's go. So when I see this, well, when you see this, and I know this is a webinar, so the chat function probably isn't up, but when you see this, I want you to ask yourself, what do you see? Because this is the bumper sticker of America. This is the creed of the nation. You know, give me you're tired, you're poor, you're huddled masses, those who yearn to be free. We love to put forward this. But when you see this, what comes to mind? For most Americans, there's a sense of pride that, we've been through a lot, but hey, come one, come all. This is the land of the free and the home of the brave. You got a shot here. I'm going to push tonight. At the foot of the Statue of Liberty, its designers put this there on purpose. Everything that glitters ain't gold. I love the country, but I'm just saying that there's some things that still bind us. And there's a deeper message to that statue I submit to you that literacy are the chains on the feet. That if you can't read today, if you're illiterate, functionally illiterate, you're not going nowhere. And I don't care how bright your torch burns, you're not going nowhere. And so I just, like I said, let's go get it today. I want to really push our thinking. The question is, what do we have to be to completely unfetter, to completely access our civil liberties? I love quoting Mother Maya. Some of you may have seen this before, but I just, this is, I believe, a 1995 quote. She gave an interview at the long with Ken Kelly, and I found this, and I looked at that last sentence, and it just threw me. I put this on Twitter the other day. People were still. I mean, we just haven't considered, many of us, the implications in the long arc of justice that Dr. King was talking about, that the elimination of illiteracy is as serious as the abolition of slavery. Now, I know some people, when they read it, they say, "What, are you serious? Like, you talking about slavery? You talking about chattel slavery, a form unseen in the modern world. It was different before. Slavery was different, but the chattel version of slavery, where you in perpetuity, you and your descendants, it's different. So how can you even compare the two?" And he said, it's as serious an issue. I just want to submit that to you for your consideration tonight as it frames the rest of this conversation. So when we think about literacy and schools and the crisis that Aoife was talking about, another brother that spoke after her, there are some things that come to mind. There are things that gather our attention. They, this is the bumper sticker. We talk about the conditions and the reading, and the politics is big, and all the different acronyms. And we have so many acronyms, it's ridiculous. But this is what usually comes to mind when we talk about literacy and the quote unquote literacy crisis, if we perceive there to be one. These acronyms, I mean, you've heard, well, I don't know if you've heard of DEI, the diversity, equity, and inclusion. I believe I got it right. DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion. And then CRT, you've heard of critical race theory. Now, it's not my desire to get into the politics of either of these things. I don't. I was on the state level of NAACP at California, our committee, and we were asked, should we endorse this brief that was put forward to defend critical race theory? And we went back and forth for several meetings on this. I mean, this was a big, because you remember, this was a hot item to discuss, especially in academia. And should we endorse this brief? Should we not? Should we take a stand on this? And I didn't say a word throughout the entire discussion until finally the chair said, "Kareem, what do you think about CRT in this brief? You haven't given your opinion." And I said, our kids can't read the brief. We're effectively arguing about how many angels can dance on the head of a pin. I understand the importance of it, and there's a role for that conversation. But right now, our children are circling the drain, and we have to choose what we consume ourselves with strategically and wisely. So it's not about the things being important or not important. It's just a matter of, there are what we call WMDs, weapons of mass distraction, to what's going on in our schools and to the acute needs of our children. Now, listen, I know I'm stepping on somebody's toes. Listen, just charge it to my heart, not my head, or to my head, not my heart, I should say. But I got to tell the truth, and this is as I see it, and I'm open to engage afterwards. But there are the unseen things beneath what we call the waterline that we oftentimes don't address. While we stay above and we talk about all these things, and listen, we can get into the race and class and the money and the test results and we can do that, especially the politics. Lord knows we love to argue about politics. But these things, the reading crisis in America is fed with these things. Dyslexia is not being addressed in a meaningful way in many of our universities for educator preparation, leaving our educators to make bricks without straw, figuratively speaking. The adult learner's bias is very important. First of all, I see myself this way. This is my identity. But I learned it this way, therefore it must be the right way, is a default setting, not realizing 35% of us are going to learn to read with almost any kind of instruction. And the other 65% need it done a certain way. And it's difficult to perceive that if you are in the other group. It takes vulnerability, it takes courage to overcome this dynamic. And I'm going to talk about a little bit of a couple of other ones, but I do want to talk about this buy-in from teachers in the curriculum. So you can't do this without your teachers. I got a newsflash, and and we have to fight our tribal instincts and the blame. There's plenty of blame to go around. It's not going to be, because we kind of about what's best for our kids, and at some point we got to put our, turn our swords into plowshares. We have to actually focus on solutions and have a constructive approach to things. And we got to have your teachers with you. And they're also right now trying to figure this out. They're in a very vulnerable position because they are the professionals. And so a professional to say, hey, I need to learn more is a very vulnerable place to be, or I need some support, or I need this, or I need that. I'll get to the apartheid later, but the curriculum versus prep time, listen, you can spin it all how you want to. You can buy a brand new curriculum that is aligned to the science of reading. Wonderful. And then ask them how much time the teachers have to prepare for that stuff. How much does it take for full implementation? How much time is in your contract? If those two things don't line up, they're virtue signaling. They may not intend to do it, but you have to make sure that the systems line up with the intentionality. The audio has to match the video. The audio won't play this, but I'll just quickly tell you, this young man is a Dr. Keon Anderson. He couldn't read. He was in 9th grade and he just wasn't reading. He was reading, and he said, like a low 2nd grade level. In other words, he could not read. Now he's a published author. He's a reader for our University of California system. When you apply to school, he's one of the people that reads it. He's, written 15 books, and he is a phenomenal young man. Happy to know him. He's about 28 years old now. Could not read. When you hear him talk, he explains that in 9th grade, he had a teacher. Her name was Miss Obiagu. And she said, young man, and she gave him a little assessment, a little screener. Young man, you have dyslexia. Before that, he thought he was just dumb, because that's what our children think. I'm not getting this. It's not working for me. School is just not for me. But Miss O, as he calls her, said, wait a second. No, this is what's going on. You have a processing difference. You have dyslexia. So we got to go back to the root and make sure we got to clean all this up. And she taught him his sounds, how to crack the code. Some of the things that Aoife was saying in the very beginning. The teacher who had, I don't know where she went to school or what her training was, but I do know that those are the type of things that educators can do if they have the right training, background, and support. So our kids go from being seen as a problem, right, to simply being a student who needs a free and appropriate public education, and sky's the limit. I doubt you guys can hear that, so I'm just going to move on. I wish you could. So every now and then, and I'm going to get into some of the nuts and bolts of what needs to happen, but I just want to just level set here. On the internet, I think this was, maybe it's Facebook. It's a Facebook group. Here's a group that, every now and then folks say the quiet part out loud. Every now and then. You have to be careful because people stay on brand and on message. But every now and then, people allow you a peek under the hood. And it just so happens that this Facebook group had a moderator from this particular curriculum, Fontes and Pinnell, this company. And she got into an exchange with a parent. These parents who are advocating for dyslexia, for students with dyslexia, they go hard, as you all know, because they have to, because you understand it's you against the world. And so they somehow got into this closed group, and she was tired of them causing a ruckus and questioning their methods. And she said, look, you want to turn the whole system upside down for 20% of kids. What's wrong with you people? The thinking behind this is everything is working just fine if you would just stay in your place. And a lot of us do that. We get intimidated by the titles and the roles and the dignitaries and the credentials, and we do stay in our place. But there comes a time, when dry bones have to get up. But so this is a litmus test for our ethics. Secondly, she said, I've told you once, and if you keep talking, we're going to kick you out. See, this is the power dynamic. And it may not be between you and a Facebook group or a billion-dollar company. It may be between you and a legislature, or you and colleagues, or you and some organization, or you and a neighbor, or you and the principal, or a teacher versus the super. I get it. This conversation about dyslexia and literacy triggers the power dynamics quickly. And thirdly, if you don't know better, you get talked out of the things that you do know. Please stop spreading this myth. No, we're not teaching the kids to guess. You go back to those videos that I posted at the beginning, they're absolutely teaching kids to guess. MSV is they would call it context clues, right? Meaning syntax, clues, call them clues. We're not guessing, they're clues. But this forces this conversation about dyslexia and students and literacy in general, it forces us to challenge our assumptions. I want to jump to this report. Many of you may have seen this report. This is an old report. This is 90. Oh gosh, I'm dating myself here. I believe 95. Could be wrong. Could be 93. But this came from the Office of Justice, and they put out a report about reading instruction and the research basis for how kids are taught. And effectively, this is your prison system talking back to you. It's coming from the Department of Justice, and they're saying, wait a second, we understand that educators have a job to do, but we see the kids coming to jail, and we have something to say about it. So they commissioned and wrote this report and published it. It gets very little attention. Let me tell you a little bit of the abstract. They said in there in the abstract, we found out, this is the jails talking, we found out that reading failure is the reason why young people are coming in here. It's not just a correlational relationship. It's likely a cause. And the second one is they can't crack the code. They're unable to decipher accurately in fluency. That's the same thing. They can't crack the code. They can't read. All right. The second thing they said, and I'm going to take my time, I'm going to slow down a little bit for this. I hope you guys are with me here. These three things I want to point out. One, they said, well, we found out that a lot of kids coming in here have been identified as special needs students. Okay. When we test them, we found out that there's actually no evidence to indicate that there's something going on. There's no processing difference for the majority of a lot of the kids. So they're labeled a certain way, but we come find out that no, that they just weren't taught. But then the ones who do have a learning difference, whether it's dyslexia or otherwise, now understand this is 30 years ago, so the language is a little bit different. When they say handicapped readers, that's who they're talking about. They are not receiving, this is number 4, the type of instruction recommended by the research. Now, it was experimental 30 years ago. It's no longer experimental. The case is closed. But what the jails are saying, first of all, there's nothing wrong with these kids. The ones who process things a little differently, they're just not getting what they need. And then the number 5, I mean, just hold on. Let me slow down. Because when I read this, it just hit me like a ton of bricks. Here's the jail talking. Now, I understand that we have reports that come out from universities and, department of this and department of that, sure. But the prisons are telling us, hey, these kids they can't read. And the research says this, but the schools are doing that. In fact, number 5, the reading teachers have been denied a knowledge of the methods that work for kids. They're not getting the structure alerts. They're not getting the things that Aoife talked about. They've been denied that. Lord Jesus. So going into my background a little bit. So I used to box when I was a teenager, and at the police athletic league. And when you box, your arms, this is what people don't know about boxing, your arms get heavy. Even in just a little 3-round amateur bout, after a while, you do this dance where, listen, I'm gonna hug you, you hug me. We'll look like we're fighting, but we both tired. And if you don't throw a punch and I don't throw a punch, we're gonna get through this together. Boxers, you go through that because you're just tired. Your chest is burning, your arms are hurt. We just go. And so there's a silent deal that you make in the ring. So my push for us tonight is need to take the deal. If you're just quiet, go along to get along. Nobody, everything can go like the lady said in the chat. 80% is working fine for us, she said. Just take the deal. Stay in your place. I'm hoping I'm in the right crowd of people who aren't into deal making like that. Because we have to ask ourselves, at what price? What's the amount of loss we're willing to accept? And the sector has essentially taken reading instruction, which is a discipline of study and practice, and they made it politics. They've made publishers have made it big business. People are afraid of their credibility being under attack, so they don't feel like they can get off brand. And there's a culture in many parts of academia that is just ignoring it, and it's a cult-like following to some things. I Love Lucy. You know, there's one publisher who has that name, and so many people just swear. I'm not going to think for myself and dig into this research. I'm just going to align myself with the one I feel makes me feel like I'm doing right. When I go back to Marva Collins, as Lene mentioned in the beginning, one of the greatest educators this country has ever known, she was using the science of reading. Go look at the videos. It's linked in one of those initial links, the tiny URLs, where, you know, they study her methods, and kids who were considered mentally uneducable are now doctors and lawyers, and they've got PhDs and all of the rest. And she was leveraging the science of reading. She was using a curriculum called Open Court. She adapted it to but Latin and Greek roots, classics, and all the rest. But that's what she was doing. Why didn't we put her on a pedestal and emulate her methods instead of someone who never, ever worked in elementary education and had the habit of teaching kids to read? It befuddles me. That's a question for another time about who gets elevated. Very quickly, I'm going to run through this, and it's going to be kind of a blur. So I'm I got to slow myself down here. This, as again, as my son says, big brain. This is a big brain. Dr. Tony Eiten is this guy who does a lot of research. He's a noted health advocate, let's just say. He worked for the California Endowment and others, and also worked for the Alameda County of Health. And that's a county in California. And he and his team did research. And they looked at all the different factors in our environment that impact us, that create this stress that we have. And you know, I'm sure some of us, especially those of us who work with the NAACP, you know, we have different committees to navigate some of these things, whether it's environmental committee, education committee, political action committee, you name it, housing committee. There's plenty of stress to go around, but that creates a load on the individual. Then they studied about 400,000 death certificates. They just analyzed the data, and they found something. They you know, where they lived, the health, and they controlled for things like AIDS, homicide, things that, you know, maybe they could be in your control, but they control for those things. They push those things out of the data. They just looked at causes of death, and they used their county in Alameda, which is right across from San Francisco. This is Oakland, California, and includes Oakland and Berkeley and other cities. And this is what they found. They found that individual tracts of land had different different life expectancies. They found that They found that the conditions in, you can drill down to how long people were expected to live based off where they live. It was replicable, it was consistent, and they were able to drill down to certain causes or conditions. And in these red zones, high school graduation, unemployment, poverty, whatever. And then for the green zones is something different, home ownership and this and so he came to talk to us. I was a principal at the time, and he said, "Listen, I'm coming to you because you are the educators, and what we now realize is that literacy is the key to all of this." He came pleading before the principals. He's like, "I'm doing all this research about life expectancy. Come to find out, it's about education and literacy. It's literally a matter of life and death." And he drilled down to say about every year, about $12,500 buys you extra year. Listen, big brain. They drilled it down, and it caps off at about 150,000. At that point, it's all the same. So, what are the implications for us as activists, as teachers and professionals and community members, principals, etc., superintendents, legislators? We're not. This is not just. It is education. It's also health. Last one on this, I believe. He found there are some counties or some cities. You're talking about just a few miles apart. 24-year difference life expectancy. This is how the literacy crisis unfolds around us. And this is all across the country. They then replicated the study all across the country. And they found, oh, same thing. You pick a location, same thing. So here now we're talking about civil rights, and I'm so glad that the NAACP is involved in this at the state and the local level. People look at the civil rights struggle now as, oh, that's old black and white newsreel stuff. Well, okay, sure. But there's more to it than that. The civil rights struggle took preparation. Yeah, you may have seen a newsreel of a march, but it took they trained and they prepared to steel themselves for what was to come. I mention this because this is the new civil rights struggle, and you have to prepare yourself and your team for what's to come. Not everybody in the lunchroom is going to agree with you. Not every legislator is going to agree with you. It is not because of malice. Oftentimes they just don't know. It's the culture. It's the air that they've been breathing. Oops, let me go back. You have to be able to handle, and you have to be able to handle the threats. You're going to lose your job if you speak up. That's the feeling that many of us get. You know, somebody is going to pull your plug. Real or perceived, we feel that. So I just hearken back to those who come before us who have walked these paths. They didn't just wake up one day with a picket sign. They prepared themselves for the threats that they would face. And that preparation ain't always fun. You take this letters training or Orton Gillingham training or something, or you're studying on how to support dyslexic learners. It's not always fun. It's going to take work. Extra classes, extra this. Now, if your political elected officials are on point and you have enough political leverage and et cetera, you can get, hey, you're going to do this, but we're going to provide you a stipend for your training, et cetera. Great. But it's not always fun. And that's oftentimes unseen and unnoticed. The preparation that happens. It was mentioned earlier that the NAACP has a resolution. This is one of the links as well, tiny URLs, but it's 2014, and it's wonderfully made. I think Sister Clarice Jackson was the original author of this, and it's there, but it's also going to take resolve. You know, they say faith without works is dead. You need the resolutions, but you also have the resolve has to be behind it to not accept anything less. Are we screening for kids early, K1, 2? Do we have safety nets in place? Do we have tier 1 instruction lined up right to include the 5 things I'm going to show you in just a minute? Here we go. So the American Federation of Teachers, long ago. And I use them because NEA hasn't come out with a position on this, but AFT has done it a long time ago. AFT, that's Randy Weingartner's teachers union. Well, it's not her teachers union, but she's the president of it right now. They said, look, if you want to have an effective reading program, here's 5 things you got to have. And it lines up to the science of reading. It's exactly what students who are dyslexic need, by the way. It all lines up. They've been on this for years now. You got to have this. Something that's lined up with the research consensus, the phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, vocabulary, comprehension. You got to it has to be delivered systematically and explicitly, not inferentially and opportunistically. You got to have high quality PD. Do the teachers in New Jersey have access to the science of reading? Do they have access to the professional development? Do they have to come out their own pocket? Who's delivering it matters. All the other materials have to be aligned with the research. And do you have assessments that are timely? And when I say timely is it's not just because, remember, we have learner's bias. Remember the below the water stuff? We're human, and we've been doing, this is a new thing for us, many of us. So we can't just rely on our perceptions. Teacher perception and interpretation is very, very important. But you have to have a system in place. In other words, I'm not testing you or screening you because I know you're a smart child, but you're not learning. No. I'm testing you because it's Tuesday. And we have a system of assessment that will catch any issues. So in other words, I'm protecting myself from my own bias because I'm human. And then it has to be timely. African-American children are usually identified for needing support much later. In fact, when they do go to special ed, if they're given the opportunity to have some sort of an IEP, it's because of behavior reasons, not academics. When really, as Aoife said, the root cause of it is literacy. So if you had to score yourself of those 5 things, what would your score be? What would the system be that you work in? Your school, your district, your city, your state? What would your score be on these 5 things? You 5 out of 5. If you're not at least 3 out of 5, your kids don't have I can't say they don't have a chance. They don't have it's free and appropriate public education. God can always make a way. But the system is not set up to support all learners if you don't have these things. Okay, really quick. I'm gonna hurry to my close here. I know time is really short. So what we have now is a system of educational apartheid. I don't say this lightly. For those of you who aren't familiar with apartheid, it was a system of separation, kind of like segregation. Those are 2 percentages that I want you all to be familiar with. 48% of incarcerated folks are dyslexic. We found this out in 2 studies, one in Texas, not that long ago, where they did this big study, the Texas Education Agency, and they found out that 48% of the inmates were the incarcerated persons were dyslexic. Another study said 47.5, same difference. 42% of students, 42% of self-made millionaires are dyslexic. Same population of kids. It's all about how we support them. They can go either way, just like anybody else, but their need is so acute and specific that if we don't address their needs, if we don't make that part of regular classroom instruction, they're not going to be able to, they're living on the razor's edge. Those 5 elements that AFT mentioned push kids toward the 42%. And that, and we may not, when we think of dyslexia, sometimes we think of people who, this is some, who is all around people. My daughter, every cuts across every demographic, gender, race, socioeconomic class. Now, however, I said apartheid because some kids have the resources. Some families have the resources to get that private tutoring that they talked about. The differentiator is not just race and class, it's money. If you have money, you're not going to let your kid fail. You're going to spend till they win. That is the system of apartheid because a lot of us just don't have that type of money. Lastly, I told myself I was going to either give a praise report or a hypothetical situation to close it. And I think I'm going to give a praise report. God has been too good to me. So I forget the hypothetical situation. I love sharing it, but I'm going to give a praise report. So my daughter is now an 18-year-old senior. I taught her how to read. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I taught her how to read. And sent her to school. Everything was fine. She loved reading, read with pizzazz and flair. And then I went about my business as a school principal, which, as you know, can be a little busy. Well, by third grade, not only was she behind, but I had to have parent-teacher conferences. We go in there, and I'm woofing, and I'm, you gonna have to wait outside, Dad, because the way she was being taught, the cueing, it actually, I want you to get this. It actually was unraveling what she had learned to do. It was in conflict. And now there's a problem. But because of the expectations for Black children, since she could read, it didn't raise alarms. We knew that she was struggling, but they didn't know because she could read. You understand? It's a pernicious setup. Time went on. School saying there's no problem. Everything's good. She's such a sweet child. Now, if she had been a chair flipper, it'd have been different. I wish she would have flipped the chair. That's the dad of me talking. I'm just saying, to get on the school's radar, sometimes if the kid don't act up, they just sit and suffer in silence. By the time she gets to high school, we finally said, we're going to have to take you out the public school system. They're not helping us. We send her to a private school. They're like, we don't deal with that. We accommodate, but we don't modify. So we ended up paying money that we didn't have, got her tested, found out she was dyslexic. Going into her junior year, she had a 2.0 and was struggling to get that. I'm almost done. And the only reason she had a 2.0 because she's a very good softball player, and that was, you got to have that to be eligible. So she was given all she had to get that. We got her screened, got her tested. She has dyslexia. And she didn't get a bunch of accommodations. She had rights to them. She didn't want them. She just had to know, I'm not dumb. Something's going on. Oh, you mean to tell me that all these people have it and I got that? Yeah. I knew something. She's been on the dean's list ever since. Y'all don't hear me. Y'all don't hear me. And let me tell you something. She's all state softball. She went to the coach said, hey, go on in. We're gonna get you in early, Bowie State University, which is a historically Black college in Maryland. And she said, but I don't have the grades. It said you have to have a 2.7, 2.0 plus, like it by the time that it was so heavy that even raising it up, it took time to get those grades up. If you don't have a 2.7, you can't apply early, you can't get this placement. But she looked at it and it said round up. She had a 2.66. Lord Jesus, y'all just don't know. So she rounded up 2.7. She qualified, and off she's going, doing phenomenally. That's my praise report. Now, she has two parents, both educators. I taught her how to read. We held her back in kindergarten, even though she could read, just because Black children can't afford to take a chance. So we held her back to give her more time. And she still came that close to missing the opportunities that she had. We have to figure out how to work together. And I'm imploring us tonight. That's why I'm so glad to have this. But we have to figure out how to make it so that the kids don't have to have everything going for them to make it. It can be accessible to all children. So that being said, I appreciate so much the Montclair's chapter of the NAACP and the state conference as well for prioritizing literacy, specifically dyslexia. Those 5 things that AFT laid out are literally in your resolutions. I scanned that resolution. Many of them are built in there. You got to make that happen and then work together to make sure policy is put in place. So that's what I'll leave you with tonight. I'm just so glad and grateful for the invitation, and I'm wishing you all nothing but success as you advocate for our children.
Thank you so much. We're at this time, I want to open the floor for questions and answers. Mr. Weaver is here to answer our questions and help us. So we want to be transparent and open. Whatever we need, let us let us get into it. If you have any questions, you can raise your hand. You can put it in the chat or the Q&A. Would anyone like to to kick us off. Mr. Terry.
First of all, sir, I just want to thank you, for your presentation. Um, wow, I've learned a lot myself tonight just listening to you and to Ms. Joseph's, her presentation also. I'm a retired law enforcement officer also, and I worked in the juvenile justice system for many years. And it's amazing that a lot of people, even law enforcement officers, don't know exactly how important that presentation you just gave is. It's something that we need to pick up and maybe in our little way in the Montclair branch of the NAACP and maybe the region, because we do work with Tom and Newark and Irvington and some of the others around in our region. Make sure that this program is pushed a little bit harder, And I just wanted to thank you for the presentation. It was an opener, for some of the points that you brought up.
I'll just say thank you for that. And we're stronger together. I'm the education chair in the Oakland branch. We can work together on some of this stuff. There's no reason why we can't lock arms. And as a national organization, with the resolutions we put forward, we can support each other on the floor, the convention, et cetera. But this has to be made front and center because this impacts all our kids. And hopefully, we can also move away from dyslexia being seen as a white thing, because it oftentimes is. Decoding dyslexia, for the most part, is a white organization. And that's okay, but it impacts everybody, every community. Black kids oftentimes aren't called dyslexic, they're called dumb. I know that's very coarse language, but I'm just saying that we oftentimes don't click down to find out what's going on. We just, they're bad or they're dumb. No, they have a processing difference the same way this child did who had the money for private tutoring. This child does, and now they're flipping chairs and you wonder what's going on in 8th grade. Knowing that they're sitting in this class with their hormones raging, all these cute little girls and boys around them. Yeah, they're flipping the chair. What are you thinking? You call on them to read and they can't read. What do you think is going to happen? So it behooves us all to work together on behalf of our children. And I can just say that we'd be happy to partner and work with you so that we can do it together instead of just going separately.
Yes, Mrs. Wushi.
Thank you, Dr. Weaver, for that powerful presentation. Literacy is life. Like, I wrote that across my entire notebook because you really just put all of it together on how it is the school to prison pipeline, on how it does impact longevity, life expectancy, quality of life, and to understand that it is that powerful of an impact, right? That we all really need to buckle down and really lock and load with our resources. And, it's my 21st year in the industry, and I spent 17 years as an educator, and now I'm a principal at a K-5 school. And I have to say, well, when Ife spoke, I took notes. I said, girl, preach. Yes, that's exactly right. And I learned more from my students than I did from my 4 degrees. And one thing that I really am proud of, because as you were talking, I was like, oh my God, is Montclair, I started to really critique where our district is right now. Where are we with the learning loss? That's a great question by that parent, June. And also, where are we with our Black and brown babies when it comes to this achievement gap, which we all know is a relation gap? And Ife talked about, she used the word systematic in her presentation. And I said, man, that's exactly right. Your presentation was all about gutting all of that entrenched systems that are all, we know historically, are systems of oppression that are all baked in with the haves and baked in to separate haves and have-nots. And I gave my district a 3 out of 5. I said, we are premature right now, but we unleashed Acadience, which is our early screening for our babies to let us know where are they with their phonemic awareness and the foundational literary skills and their difficulty with that. I've seen that impact in my building. I was trained in science of reading last year, which blew my mind, because as a history teacher, I was like, where was this? I could have taken this and transformed. And now as a building leader, when we all were trained, all staff and all administrators, and the science of reading just blew our minds on the how the mind processes reading. I'm really proud of, the superintendent, Dr. Pons, and our entire ECI team, our directors. They all put together, they revamped the RTI process because everything is a system, right? So we're going to get trained in the science of reading. And now we know there's a how to with all this, and there's multiple components at play. And it's not about reading comprehension. There is some literary building blocks we totally ignored and messed up. So we got to that. And then from there, we said, here's Acadians. Now, this is a timely assessment that gives my teachers on the spot where Francis Abushi is. Francis didn't do so well with fluency. Francis dropped the ball with the nonsense words. Okay, now let's take this timely report and let it instruct and guide our classroom, target goals with that student. And then, of course, RTIs, right? It made us critique our RTI system and go, man, we thought we had it right with tier 2, tier 3. Nope. So we went into a major overhaul, I would say, in the last couple of years. And I give a lot of props to our community for really pounding the pavement and having 22 Valley go, okay, what's up? We hear you, go. What is it? And they said dyslexia. And we're like, what the heck is that? So it's been incredible education for us. And we're still premature. I'm only singing praises that we're doing the work. But, with COVID, I want to review us in 5 years and say, where are we with this? And
let me just say, to cut you off, but I just want to you're a school principal, right?
I am.
So school principals have a very unique role in this. There was a time where the principal used to be called the head teacher. That was what principals used to be called. This is that season. You have to become the head learner in the building because this is a season of learning.
It is.
And we're not looking for principals. Yes, we want them to have answers, but people know you can't fool people. I mean, if you'd have known better, you'd have done better. So now, where are you at on your journey? Can you be transparent with your own learning and your own journey? Can you invite people in? This isn't a checklist thing. The bureaucrat in us wants to have some checklist and a rubric, and that's fine, but there's adaptive leadership that has to happen where you help people to change. Change is hard. It goes in their personal and professional identity, sometimes even the racial identity. It goes into their belief systems. It goes into how they were raised and trained and all the rest. Their identity with school. I know people who went to Ohio State University. Fondas Pinnell has an endowed chair there. You can't tell them nothing about. I know some people who went to Teachers College, and that was the feather in their cap. Like all of that. So you got to be able to help them to navigate the personal stuff. We call it adaptive change. That's one thing. The second thing is vulnerability is in short supply nowadays.
Oh, facts. Yeah.
How can you get people to be vulnerable enough to learn and take a risk when the teachers are the tip of the spear? They're the ones dealing with the parents huffing and puffing. They're the ones scared of NAACP knocking on their door. They're the ones, it's not the superintendent in that parent-teacher conference, it's the teacher. So how can you say, hey, listen, I got you. It's okay to have a season of learning. Send them my way. We'll have a conversation. I'll bring all the parents into the auditorium and we're going to have this conversation about this learning journey we're on. There's a type of leadership that's needed now that's a little bit different than what was needed a few years back.
Right.
And part of that might be creating the space for learning, right. which means not just the modeling, but is there a safety net underneath them? We always talk about at FULCRUM, we're working with one group. It's called Ignite. They do virtual tutoring one-on-one. They train teachers. They train tutors. They hire them. They recruit them. They train them. They manage them. They coach them, and then they have them teach the foundational skills. Union people out here love it because it takes some of the pressure off. While I'm going through all this training, I got to make sure these kids aren't in a dire situation. And we're saying, okay, well, guess what? Why can't you get your tutors from some of these historically Black colleges? Why can't you get your tutors from different folks in the community? Why can't we have some of our because they get paid too? By the way, I get $20 an hour or 25, whatever it is. They get money for this thing. Why can't the teachers, before they come into the classroom, already have the experience of teaching children how to read? and be good at it. So that when they get into the building, it's like, yeah, I got this. That helps with teacher retention. It helps with environment. It helps with teacher satisfaction and longevity and endurance and the joy. So anyway, there's a lot of things, but you as a site leader, you got to figure out how to hold your folks. The adaptive leadership. Don't become a bureaucrat on us now.
No, I'm
right?
a transparent individual.
I'm figure out what your people need.
Right, that's exactly right. And
figure out what your people need and get it to them. That's right.
Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm. And I shout out to Gina in the chat, Gina Fort. One of the questions she asked was, she talked about, she has a background from Oakland and did her grad practicum at a Lowell Middle School, which is now shut down in Oakland. I just want to shout out to her and thank you for that. And you keep fighting a good fight. And there's some other excellent questions in here. How can we separate politics from an effective instruction? Listen, let me tell you something. There are people who say, oh, science and reading, that's a conservative thing. Or that's a white thing. I kid you not. A white reading? Do you know who you talking to? Do you know what Black folks had to go through to gain access to literacy, full and complete literacy? That's why I put that Maya quote, Angelou quote up, because you know, people are going to frame it how they want to. But just to be clear, in all our talk about social justice and in the groups and the protests and all this, literacy is a we thing. I see my people in that too. Black folks want their children to read. And guess what other communities do as well? But you got to be careful how you see the moral high ground of folks. And that's why the NAACP is so important. The NAACP changed the calculus on all that. This is a civil rights issue. It's not just a political, liberal, Republican, conservative, Democrat, whatever. This is a civil rights issue. And really, it's a human rights issue if you really want to get down to it. So that's why I'm so glad to see that the state and local NAACP are coming together on this, because this is something that we need their leadership on, to take this out of the realm of the sterile ivory tower, debates, the white papers and all that. No. We're trying to save our children. And that's why the NAACP is absolutely one of the key organizations to lead the way on this.
I see Kendra Johnson had a question. Do you see that? Her question? Let me see something.
Oh, I see. Can you discuss the parent roles in those 5 items? Okay. So yeah, sure. Let me jump to this. I will give some very specific. She wants to know, what are the parents' role in these things here? These things right here. Thank you for that question, Kendra. Okay. Parents, you need to find out, first of all, if you go to the school districts and say, is your curriculum aligned to the research and the science? They're all going to say yes. Doesn't matter if it is or not, because they figure that you don't know better anyway. So that's just what they do, right? So you got to ask specific questions such as, may I see? No. Do I need to do a Freedom of Information Act request, or are you just going to give me? Because I'm going to get it either way. Are you just going to give me the scope and sequence for the skills being taught in reading? In other words, I need to see, I want to know what's being taught when. When do you learn this sound and that sound and the other sound, so that I can support my child, so that I can monitor my child's progress, so I can have a knowledgeable conversation. You got to get that. And if they say we don't have that, or we'll get back to you, that tells you all you need to know. What is your skill-based scope and sequence? Or are you just doing it on the fly? You think they need this, so you're doing that today. You think they knew that, so you're doing it. Or is everybody just open? So that's one thing. The second thing is, and this is really where parents can leverage. So the teachers need your help. They're stuck. If they buck the system, especially if they don't have tenure, good luck with that. Stay in your place, teacher. The leadership might say, well, they can't tell you that. You're a parent. They don't pay you. In fact, you pay them if you really want to get technical about it. So you can say the things that the teachers wish they could say, but they, they don't want to lose their job, but they'll talk to you if they know that you're willing to fight. You just don't just start throwing rocks at them, but you got to say, listen, how can I best add? What do you need? What type of professional development opportunities would you like me to advocate for at the board level? what kind of supports are needed, curricular, the curriculum you're using, the interventions, the tier 2 stuff, what do you need? We'll advocate for you, and we'll go, and here's the key, we'll go together. That means it's not just, the white families. It's not just the black families. It's the second language learners. It's the kids who have special needs. We're going to have a coalition, and we're going to go together to the board and demand certain things. And we're going to always CC the superintendent because they need to know. Right. So listen, I could keep going, but those are the kinds of things within this that you all can do. Make sure that curriculum is right. But most importantly, get a clear scope and sequence for the sub skills. Make sure the assessment. What does the assessment calendar look like in your district or in your school? When do they assess? Is it every 6 weeks? Is it some sort of a cadence, or is it when somebody thinks that they think there's a need? Structured literacy means there's structure to it. It's not just my perception of which child needs help when. That's important, but we have a system in place so the kids aren't falling through the cracks. Listen, we're testing because it's Tuesday, not because I think your child is smart or not smart. It's just Tuesday. That's what we do. You want to see systems and structures in place. And as parents, you can ask for that.
Okay, June.
I would like to know, especially the people who work in the Montclair schools, how many kids do you think are in the high school right now, mostly Black males, who cannot read at a 3rd grade level?
I'm sure the number is, if not alarming, incredibly sad to come to that reality of where we're at. Because I know when it comes to even our referral process, the IEPs, we're still navigating the equitable practices of that and unpacking that system.
And my follow-up would be, how do they get there? Because I actually worked with a child who did not have parents who were ever going to be involved. They weren't able. And my experience was the elementary school teachers say, oh, he didn't get it. His mom didn't read with him. He didn't do this. He didn't do that. The middle school teachers said, oh, well, he didn't learn in elementary school. And the high school teachers said, oh, he didn't know how to read when he got here. And the thing that was frustrating is he was actually a very nice and very popular kid, but there was a complete passing of the buck until Mr. Earl, who actually got personally involved with this young man. He got an extra year at the high school. He learned to read basically, and he graduated. But in a district where we've got RJ, we've got Black Lives Matter, we've got all this other stuff, and we have this movie, The One That Got Away, which is a fallacy, because we have a handful that get away every year, year after year. And how do you get the people in the classrooms, because they're the ones who touch these children the most, to actually commit to not having this happen anymore?
Let me jump in right quick, not to take the school district folks off the hook, but let me just jump in. So how did they get that way? What can be done about it? They weren't taught to read. They weren't taught leveraging the research consensus and the brain science. That's just point blank it. And their families didn't have the money and insight to get private tutoring, to pay their way out of it. Because you can pay your way out of this thing. Okay. So everybody else is left behind. And on top of that, George Bush, back when he was governor for Texas, running for president, he came before the NAACP National Convention, and he said, we have to beware of the soft bigotry of low expectations. And just as dangerous as somebody with a baton hitting you upside your head is low expectations dogging you all the way throughout school. It'll kill you just the same. We have to make sure the alarm bells go off sooner. They got that way because you didn't have a system of assessment. I'm not talking about state tests. I'm talking about formative, like along the way while you're forming your knowledge, assessing and identifying students like clockwork. Oh, this one needs help specifically on this skill. When you don't have those formative assessments in place, kids fall through the cracks. Now, if your son is 7 foot tall or 6'2", run a 4.40, that's a whole different conversation. We're gonna find a way to help your child. Okay, we gonna find the money. Okay, if she's 6'7", she gonna be all right, and he gonna be all right. But most our kids are not like that. Most our kids is not gonna have that coach take an extra, make sure they get the reading. Most our kids are just regular kids, and they're depending on us to put those 5 things in place that I put on that slide earlier. That means a quality curriculum. That means professional development that educators can access. That means assessments that are systematic in nature, not just opportunistic. It means the other materials, those other things. That's how they got there. Those 5 things aren't in place. So those are your marching orders. Those should be the specific questions you're asking your school board, your superintendent, legislatures, whoever, the newspaper, whoever you got to keep going until you get somebody to pay somebody. That's what free and appropriate education means. Your child has a right to that. And the statistics, the statistics you already know, it's not good. But if you split it by economics, it's a whole different ballgame.
We have a few other questions, but I know the time is kind of slipping from us, and I want to be conscious of the time. So I want to thank Gina and Miss Graham and Miss Bussey. Thank you all for your questions. I appreciate that. But I want to give the district a chance, if there's someone from the district, if you would like to say a few words. And then also I would like to introduce Mr. Purier and ask if you could please say a few closing remarks. And then we're going to turn it back over to Mr. Weaver if he can give us the final word for the evening. Do we have anyone from the district who would like to say anything at this time?
I believe that Ms. Ibushi has said a lot about, but I don't know if you want to say any more, because Ms. Ibushi, the district is getting, like Ms. Ibushi indicated, is getting a lot of the pieces into place. We instituted Acadians. We've supplied a lot of training around the science of reading. We now we're on our third cohort out to Fairleigh Dickinson for Orton Gillingham training, a 2-year program. In addition, this past year, all the curriculum support teachers went through IMSE Orton Gillingham training, and it is now being offered also to all the teachers in the self-contained resource room. So well, I definitely hear what June is saying, and we need to catch up with those kids that have so far slipped through the cracks. I feel like the goal should certainly be, like, from this point on, to really shore up our systems that these failures don't continue to happen, that we have, as Dr. Weaver said, a systematic approach in place, that we catch all our kids, that no kids are allowed to fail. And as we know, when we provide identification and intervention in K through 2, we have a lot better success and can even reach levels of keeping kids in gen ed rather than they fail and go to special ed. So we have a lot of goals, like Ms. Ibushi said, we're in the formative stages, but we really hope, with the guidance of folks like Dr. Weaver and the help of the NAACP and parents, really putting our feet to the fire and asking the difficult questions to continue to move the needle forward. And Ms. Ibushi, please.
No, you absolutely said it. And for Montclair, when we know better, we do better. And we owe it to every child, right? And at the end of the day, we're still in the premature stages, but we are all ready to really finally do the work for our babies across the board. So I'm also eager to see the outcome and the accountability as well.
Yes, thank you. And so Mr. Puryear, can you please speak on behalf of the state NAACP? I'll give you a chance to say any words at this time.
Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to congratulate the Montclair unit of the NAACP for putting this program together. I also would like to thank all the other presenters and especially Brother Weaver for the thought-provoking information that he has shared. The attainment of education is empowering to the individual and to our society. The United States is the only country known to have had anti-literacy laws. This is not because African Americans could not learn, but the law existed to prevent African Americans from learning. My screen is stuck for a second. Give me 1 second, please. Unlike that, there we go. Okay. There is no doubt that the African Americans can learn, could learn, but the law existed to prevent African Americans from learning. It is impossible to enslave the body of a person whose mind is free. No doubt this is a sign of the importance of education and teaching. The old literacy laws would not have had to be on the books if African Americans could not learn, but that was not the case. The fear was that by learning, African Americans could share ideas, they could learn of their impressive history, that they would understand the value of the work and produce their innovative minds. A major concern is that if we were illiterate, they could forge documents, or if the African American slave was illiterate, they could forge documents and pursue their freedom. Most of all, they would seek freedom and eliminate the vast source of free labor. Making it illegal for African Americans to learn to read and write reinforced the notion that African Americans were inferior to whites. In our current society, I apologize, my screen is freezing on me. In our current society, fear is once again at the heart of the current anti-literacy agenda. While no one is denying people of color the right to learn to read or write, they're being denied a comprehensive education, and along with the detrimental effects on students of color when they do not see themselves reflected in the curriculum, white students are also denied an opportunity to learn the truth and provide learn information about America. The state conference of the NAACP and our 41 units are committed to improving literacy rates in our states. We know that we need to engage stakeholders around the systemic structure needed to cultivate excellent reading and outcome for all students. Recently at our executive committee, the state conference of the NAACP reviewed and approved a resolution that we call the right to read. This resolution recognizes and addresses the educational implications of literacy and dyslexia in our state. To quote from our executive summary, every student deserves access to great teaching, equitable resources, and a safe learning environment from grade school to college campuses. The NAACP has always stood for the fundamental human rights of literacy and the right to read as necessary to realize our vision for an inclusive community rooted in liberation, where all people can exercise their civil and human rights without discrimination. We listed 7 expectations: better access to resources, better pre-service training for aspiring educators, better screening and assessment, better intervention and special education when needed, better professional development for teachers of reading, better curriculum instruction, and better instructional leadership. A child who struggles to read experiences the daily trauma of illiteracy at school. When a child receives effective reading and instruction and appropriate intervention, his or her behavior and academic implication for the child are very good. We hope to be working with our local communities and our national office in order to make literacy and the elimination of dyslexia or determination of dyslexia something that we can eradicate with all the skills that we need. I thank you for the opportunity to be here this evening, and I'm looking forward to more information from Brother Weaver and also the other units, including Montclair.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's 8:34, and I want to turn it over to Dr. Weaver. I want to get you to give us our last word. You can do a prayer, however you want to do. And also, if you can, please share with us a little bit more about your film, because we definitely want to get to be able to have an opportunity to show it here in our town, but we would like to hear more about it. And just any last words that you have. I want to thank everybody for attending this evening. This has been recorded, and we want to make sure we blast this out to as many people in the community as possible. We are ready to lock arms and build bridges with our district and families and the community. And thank you all. Brother Weaver, thank you. And you
I'm going
have
to
the last word.
share something before I take us out with a word of prayer. But I want to share something really quickly. While you were talking, I put this together, 3 things really quickly to show you. I try to say, if I could say it all in a couple of images, what would it be? And this is what I would say. This is what we have now. We're missing steps. The kids aren't getting a foundation. We have to be careful because our inner bureaucrat, even though when school districts want to do the right thing, they oftentimes create things like this. They can't help themselves because they're trying to meet the needs of all these different constituencies and whatever they will pick the most complicated thing. Lord, they just do. I've seen it in district, including Oakland's district. We pick something complicated too. Well, you trying to get your folks to do this? Where's the low hanging fruit? Can we put some guardrails up to make sure kids don't fall off? Can we have some, lighted, just straight to the point to get our kids reading? It's not just to do the thing. It's to do it as efficiently, as systematically, and as simply as possible. And that's not disrespectful of teachers. It's just recognizing that they're human. And so are our kids. So I'll end with these 2 things. One, here's some information. That reading program, I just put this together, the reading program that I mentioned, the safety net program. There's the person who runs it. If you want to contact her, you can. They don't pay me. I just know it works. It's good for kids. So there it goes. My contact information is there. I'm happy to connect with you all. School system, parent advocacy groups, NAACP chapters. I know we definitely need to connect and with our team at FULCRUM as well. One idea is for the NAACP. I'm in the conversation right now with Morgan State University, which you all know, but Morgan State is in Maryland. They're trying to get accredited through the International Dyslexia Association. And they're trying to align their standards and things with them. And so if you figure out how to teach our kids and you commit to it, hey, you should be designated a freedom school. There should be a win for those schools, those universities who are actually trying to make a difference, from the state level to organizations like ours, et cetera. I think that's worth considering. And also there's the information to the Right to Read film. I'm grateful to be in it. LeVar Burton is an executive producer. Some of you are old enough to know who LeVar Burton is. But that's information that I wanted to share with you all. And I will take us out with a word of prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, we just thank you for this opportunity to be about your business. You said that faith without works is dead, and we're trying, Lord, to put feet on our prayers and do the things that you would have us to do, to use our positions, our resources, our time, talent, and treasure on the behalf of your children as you commissioned us to do. We want your children to be able to read your words. We want your children to be able to understand you for themselves. So we just ask for your strength, your encouragement, your endurance, all walks of life, all people from all backgrounds, Father, that we can come together and unify for a common purpose, which is we want to make sure that your children can read. So we just ask for your strength today. We ask for your encouragement. We ask for your guidance and direction, that we can actually work together and subdue our own tribalistic nature and inclinations and our politics to be about the business of elevating and supporting and loving your children. Thank you for it. In your son's name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much. And thank you all for coming. Be blessed and have a good evening.
Thank you so much.
Bye, family.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to reach out to you.
Hey, look forward to it. Thank you, Lene, for putting this together. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate you so much. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lene and Roger.
Thank you. Have a good night.